Hello and welcome back to session 5. I really hope you had an opportunity to practice your first induction. Now we're going to look at that first induction and call it the priming induction because we're just using the same steps as our priming sequence and using it again, the exact same thing, in our induction sequence. Now before we get into unconscious moments, which is going to be quite lengthy as a process, we've only covered the P. We've only covered the priming sequence. Then we've skipped the hypnotic interview just for now, and we've just given you an example of the I, which is the hypnotic induction. We've just given an example so you can get a feeling for what this is going to be about for you, when you can get a feeling or an understanding of what it feels like to put someone in hypnosis for the first time. So I really hope you had the opportunity to practice that with someone. If not, hopefully you took the time to just practice that routine in your mind. Then when we look at the other inductions later, you know exactly where that'll fit inside the FITR formula. So where does the unconscious moments or hypnotic cues come into place with the FITR formula? Well, basically the whole thing. In order to know your client's in trance, we need to see or hear certain things that they'll either tell us or we'll see formally that lets us know that everything we're doing, from the priming sequence to the hypnotic interview, to the induction we're going to do, even to the therapy and even to the testing, we need to see or hear these unconscious moments happen. These are just hypnotic phenomena to let us know that everything we're doing right at that stage is either working or has worked. What tends to happen is a lot of assumption goes into hypnosis that we think that if we just do the hypnotic routine we've been shown, that it'll work. That because we've said certain words, or we've been told to say a certain sequence, or we've been told to say a certain monologue or a technique itself, or a certain ailment our client's having, that all we have to do is just follow those steps and it'll work every time. This is far from the truth. Again, I want to take out assumptions. I don't want to be assuming my client's in trance and hoping they are, and then all of a sudden getting to the end of an hour routine that I've put into place and realize nothing's happened. I need to look for these clues along the way that lets me know without a shadow of a doubt that everything I'm doing right now is working. And if I'm not seeing these unconscious moments, it means it's not working. I want to keep it as simple as that. If I see the unconscious moments or hear them, I know what I'm doing right now, what I'm saying, or the process I'm using, or even the therapy that I'm using is working. If I'm not seeing the unconscious moments as a result of what I'm doing, saying, or using as a therapeutic tool, I know I need to be flexible and do something else until I start to notice those moments. I really want you to backtrack over what I just said right then and listen to it a couple of times. Unconscious moments with conversational hypnosis, just in this formula, is crucial to your success. We need to make sure that we're not assuming our clients in trance just because our technique says so, just because we've been told we have to do step 1 all the way through to step 5 and that's all we need to do. Hypnosis is not like that. So what is an unconscious moment? The unconscious moment is a clue from the unconscious mind that what we're doing is having an effect. Now, this should highlight a few things for us. If we used our priming sequence to get attention, and then we needed to use a technique to bypass the conscious mind. Remember, in the priming sequence, we had the overload of information. We used our EVP, which is conducive to hypnosis, and we threw in a couple little things that allowed us to use our priming sequence as part of our induction. When we skipped the hypnotic interview, as part of our hypnotic induction, we should have already started to see a couple of things happening that lets us know the intention of our priming has worked. If you listen back and I said, well, if we see Joe sitting in front of us and we start telling Joe about the goods about hypnosis, what he'll feel, what he'll notice, what he should expect, and we see Joe starting to smile and nod along like he's getting involved, this is letting me know that unconsciously something's starting to happen. And these are the unconscious moments I'm looking out for. Now, when I was a treating hypnotherapist, the unconscious moments was where I put a lot of my attention on. If I'm seeing an unconscious moment, I keep going with what I'm doing. If I don't see it, I'm not just going to go to the end of my routine and hopefully it comes out at the end perfectly. I'm going to stop mid-track or even mid-sentence, mid-story and try something else until I find these unconscious moments. I want you to be on the hunt for unconscious moments. So let's look at what an unconscious moment, the two categories of unconscious moments. One is a visual clue and one is an auditory clue. Okay? The visual clues will tend to happen more without your client noticing. Now, when we come to listening the auditorial clues, this will come as a part of the hypnotic interview. So it has categories in both. When we get to hypnotic interview, we'll discuss more about how that all comes together. So classically, this is known as hypnotic cues. This just lets you know that your client is in trance or the therapy is working, it's having some sort of effect. So let's look at the first couple of visual clues we should start to see. Now, this is not a list in apparency. This is not a list to say that these happen more than the other. This is just a formal list I've put together to give you as many classical indications that your client is where they need to be hypnotherapy. So the first one is rapid eye blinking, or the rate is either going to increase or decrease, and this is your blink reflex. Your clients will either blink a lot, or the blinking will slow down so much that it seems as if they're taking a long time to blink from one to the next. This is outside of the ordinary. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, well, I don't know how much I blink automatically right now. It really doesn't matter. You're going to notice certain things, especially tending when your clients start to increase their blinking. It's out of the ordinary. So this is your first clue. The next clue is eye fixation. Again, this can be increased attention on you, almost like your client can't keep their eyes off you. This is a great thing when we look at eye contact later. Or there'll be lack of attention. As an example, they're looking around the room and they're not facing their attention on you and almost not ignoring what you're saying, but not really paying attention to. Or it's not that they're looking around the room, their attention could be elsewhere, but it could be stuck on an inanimate object. It could be the corner of a desk, it could be at the floor, it could be at your shoes as a hypnotist, they could be looking over your shoulder. As long as there's attention somewhere. Now, if there's lack of attention and they're looking around and they're fidgeting, we need to try and get that attention back. So you're either going to find your client will sit there and look at you and they won't be able to take their eyes off you, so to speak, or their attention is going to be sub-focused on something else. It almost looks like they're daydreaming. This is eye fixation. This just means that you're getting a lot of attention. The next one is postural shifts. This is a shift in posture or position. Let's say they're sitting down, and let's say you're using a theme like, okay, Joe, so you'll start to feel relaxed and you can go into trance. You can start to drift off and notice your body starting to get heavy, the induction we're familiar with now. And you see Joe's shoulders start to drop, or his head moves to the side and starts to relax more, or he creates a loop in his midsection and starts to take his posture down. It starts to relax or sink into the chair. Any sort of postural shifts is the unconscious mind in action. It's the body adapting to the environment you're creating, which is therapeutic in nature, which is the hypnotic circumstance that you're putting Joe or your client in. So watch out for those postural shifts. Facial, either relaxed or tensed facial features. Okay, could also be flushing of the skin or the lips or skin coloration. You might notice the face gets very red as blood starts to circumcirculate around the head, or they could go very, very pale. Whatever you're starting to notice with facial, whether it could be the relaxed or the tense facial muscles, this could be like a client's thinking intently about what you're telling them, or they're confused about what you're telling them, or their face is so relaxed and so peaceful, it looks like they've got no bones, it just looks like skin. This is a great thing to let you know that unconsciously something's starting to happen. Now you might be thinking, well, what has this got to do with the unconscious mind? These are things that we don't normally control. They're outside of awareness. Do we think, how many times do I need to blink in a minute? Do we think, how do I screw up my face to show that I'm actually thinking about something? These are automatic gestures and automatic movements that we do that are in line with the unconscious mind. So what the unconscious mind works with is taking care of all those natural functions of the body so you don't have to think about doing them. The next one is automatic movement. Now, these could be things from twitching, catalepsy, which is a stiff limb, automatic movement, levitation of a hand or a finger or a limb, anything that is outside of awareness, anything that your client is not doing on purpose that happens as a result of whatever you're doing at that point. So the twitching, we've all felt twitching before. Catalepsy could be the arm getting really, really stiff and a client not doing it on purpose, but it's happening as a result of the circumstance that you're putting them in. Automatic movement. On very common occasions, you may find if your client's sitting on a chair using the armrest, you may start to notice that maybe one of the hands starts to lift by itself. This is the unconscious mind in action. Okay, this is the levitation of limbs. These are all things that happen as a result of the unconscious mind being stimulated. Remember, the A is the attention. We bypass the conscious mind through the technique we use. We look at one induction already, which is our first hypnotic technique. That's our induction to put them into trance. And we stimulate the unconscious mind by whatever we've done so far, which is the induction. It has to have some sort of result. So one of those results could be an arm starts to lift, or you'll see the postural change, or the eye fixation. If their eyes are closed, you might see that their eyes are starting to move around underneath the eyelids, like there's some processing going on. These are all results that lets me know that the induction or the priming that I've done has worked. If I've done the induction we looked at before, which is just including the trance themes and the power words, exactly the same we did with the priming induction, the priming sequence, this has become our priming induction. If I'm not seeing any of those unconscious moments or those unconscious clues, it lets me know the induction that I'm doing is not working. It just means basically my client's sitting there with his eyes closed or her eyes closed. If I'm not seeing an unconscious moment, it means that nothing has occurred. It means that nothing has worked and I need to try something else. Okay. The next one, which also fits into the auditory clues, is breathing. You may find that your client starts to breathe a lot more, or in most cases, more commonly, their breathing slows down and almost looks, if you look really carefully, you can hardly even see their chest moving up and down. It represents the breathing sensation because their breath is so shallow. Or you might find your client will sigh like a release of a breath or a release of energy. This is another unconscious moment. Now, the most common you'll see, and I want to draw your attention to this, is breathing and eye contact, or the eyes twitching. Something to do with the eyes and the breathing has something to do with those big unconscious moments, and they're going to be the most common and the easiest to see. Now, it does not matter if you see one, or in some cases, all of them happen at once. As long as you're seeing something, keep it simple. As long as you're seeing something, you are on the right track. Now, I do want to introduce you to the auditory clues. These happen more through discussion, being that we're conversational hypnotists. We haven't really involved our client in the discussion right now. We've just been talking at them. So when we get into the more conversational stuff, which is after the P, the prime, which we're doing right now, it's just an extension of this. When we get into the hypnotic interview, it will cause us to have a conversation with our clients, and we'll be able to not just see the unconscious moments, we'll be able to hear the unconscious moments as well. So auditory clues come through expression. The expression of an issue, challenge, or addiction. And this usually comes with either a lot of pain when they're talking about their problem, like they're emotionally attached to the problem, or an excited tone or excited expression when they talk about the outcome of what they want from the session, as if they can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Also as well, when your client's expressing their problem, we look at the hypnotic interview, we'll show you how to do this. They tend to express their problem, especially at an unconscious level, knowing that all problems exist in the unconscious mind. That's why we need to bypass the conscious mind. All problems exist in the unconscious mind, but the unconscious mind has an uncanny way of expressing itself and talking about the problem. It doesn't tend to talk about it straight up front. It's not a linear thing. It's not conscious reality. It's why the conscious mind is great, but the unconscious mind is more creative. So it will tend to talk about the problem, the addiction, the issue or the challenge of what your client's having through use of metaphors, short stories. They'll talk about their feelings. They'll talk about how this affects them, what they're getting from it. They'll tend to talk about more internal representations rather than step-by-step formula, which is more conscious mind. So you need to pay attention to this. The next auditory clue is emotion. Any emotional outburst. It could be controllable emotion like some sobbing, to complete uncontrollable emotion, which is where your client cannot stop being upset. It's just a flood, a big flood of emotions. And this can happen in the negative and positive. Sometimes it can be quite uncanny that your client can be laughing as if they're having fun while they're talking about a painful problem. Your client could be having an uncontrollable burst of emotion and feeling a little bit of pain maybe, or expressing themselves through a lot of tears and emotion, but be okay with it. This is the uncanny nuance of the unconscious mind, that these two parallel dimensions, if you were, can happen at the same time. So emotions are very, very common in hypnosis, especially when you're talking about problems that are painful. Not so much painful as it hurts me, it's more of an internal hurt. The next one is language. It tends to come out as confusion. Sometimes when you ask certain questions to your client, especially in the hypnotic interview, they get so confused about how to answer you that almost like their inability to speak occurs. If you've ever talked to somebody and asked them a question and they start to reply with things like, well, it's sort of like, I feel it's not even, and they really struggle to coherently talk to you. This is when confusion sets in, and this is the unconscious mind, or this is the person going from a conscious state where finding language is very, very simple into more an unconscious state, which means they're feeling this trance or they're feeling the hypnosis starting to occur and they can't quite describe it. And that's just an example. Next one is thoughts. These can be irrational thoughts or non-conclusive thoughts. Irrational thoughts like, I can't do this in my life because this is occurring and that occurs and this occurs. And when you're listening to your client, it really doesn't make sense to you as the hypnotist. Or non-conclusive, like they've come to a point in their life or come to an understanding that they could not have an understanding of, or they're making conclusions that do not exist or cannot exist in the very place they're living in. Okay, so putting all these together, the auditory clues will happen more with the hypnotic interview, but there's still to keep an eye out when you're talking to your client, even if they're in an inductive state, if they're in trance, so to speak. This is the value of unconscious moments. If unconscious moments let us know that our induction has worked, or the very themes we're using are working, we now need to put this into place and put this into action. So let's give you another formal exercise to do. So again, if you've got the opportunity to grab a partner, we're going to use the priming induction you've done before and just include the hunt for these unconscious moments. Now, for the rest of this program, the rest of your career after this, or just the rest of the hobby that you use this for outside of this training program, we always want to be on the hunt for those unconscious moments. They give us so many valuable clues to the success of our session. Again, if we're seeing them, we're on the right track. If we're not seeing them, we need to adjust and be flexible accordingly. So what I would like you to do, I'm going to use Joe as my partner again. I'm going to do the very same thing with Joe. I'm going to ask Joe to sit down. I'm going to prime Joe. Now, while I'm priming Joe, I might play with my EVP a little bit. I'm going to use a bit of a volume change and do some pausing. When we get into the eye contact, we'll look at that later. I'm going to include that as well. Now, at the very start, as I start to prime Joe about how hypnosis is going to feel, what can be or what can happen as a result of him going into trance and what the outcome will be, I'm on the hunt for those unconscious moments. If I'm talking to Joe and not formally putting him into the induction because I'm not there yet, but I start to see his eyes starting to blink a lot, or I'm starting to see him relax from just hearing my priming sequence, or I see his posture starting to change, or I see his full attention on me, this lets me know that whatever I'm doing is stimulating the unconscious mind. I have his attention by talking to him, and if I'm seeing the unconscious moments, it must have meant that I've bypassed the conscious mind. Because how else could you see unconscious moments unless the unconscious mind is expressing them and the conscious mind is out of the way and allows those unconscious moments to surface? Think of the conscious mind as a lid on a jar. If you wanted to get the content out of the jar, you couldn't put your hand through the lid. You'd have to take off the lid, remove it, put it to the side, the lid being the conscious mind, and then you'd be able to get your hand into the jar and take out the content. Think of this as taking the lid off the mind, and once the lid's off, the unconscious moments, the expression of the unconscious mind, and this is pure unconscious expression, can float to the surface and come out of the jar. These things coming out of the jar are the unconscious moments. This is the unconscious mind letting me know that it's playing ball, it's alive, it's active, and I can start to interact with it accordingly. So again, I'll get Joe to close his eyes. I've done the priming. I've seen some little unconscious moments along the way. Then I get straight into my induction. Now, because Joe's eyes are closed, it doesn't take away the fact that I still need to be on the hunt for the unconscious moments. If my priming has worked, it means I've set up the trance bubble. So as soon as Joe goes into trance as a result of the induction, I know he's in a really good place. So I'm going to use my induction And while I'm talking about how trance feels, what he's going to experience, how he needs to just relax and drift and feel his body getting heavy or feel his body getting light, I'm still watching for those unconscious moments. If they stop and I stop seeing them, it means my induction's not working. And all I need to do is just adjust accordingly. Now this is the key. I need to adjust spontaneously. I can't set up this accordingly and know it's going to happen every time. I need to take a couple of steps forward and adjust or collaborate. I need to adjust accordingly, either go left or right or under or over, so to speak. So I'm going to adjust my tone. I might pause longer to get more of his attention. I might change my volume. Just adjust anything we've done up to this point and see where it takes you. You might even have to use different themes. This way, increasing your vocabulary is so important. If all you're using are words like relax, drift, tranquil, and they're the only three that you keep repeating through your induction, and it's not having an effect of the unconscious mind, which means you're not seeing unconscious moments, you may need to use other themes that you've learnt by expanding your vocabulary that will have more of an effect. But it's not to say those three words are useless, because they might be the three words your next client only likes, so you need to bring them back into place. We're not discarding anything, always expanding where we're becoming the hypnotist. We're learning to speak, talk, and act like a hypnotist. So I'm going to make those adjustments accordingly. So my goal right now as the hypnotist is not just to keep Joe safe. It's not just to look after him 100%. It's to be on the alert for unconscious moments. If I see them, keep doing exactly what you're doing. If I don't see them, make those adjustments. So please grab a partner if you can, have this experiment with them, and just write down after the session or take a mental note, how many unconscious moments did you see? The list that we created before, the list you created for yourself, did you notice all of those at once? Did you notice only a certain few? What were more apparent? What were harder to see? Were they very obvious? Were they very, very quick? This is the unconscious moments in action. Sometimes they can last for a long time. Sometimes they can stand out like a sore thumb. They become very obvious. And sometimes they're very fleeting and quick. As long as you're staying on the hunt for unconscious moments, you'll do more as a hypnotist than the majority can do in the industry. We take out the assumption that to think that, well, if I've done the induction, because that's what I've been told to do, or that's what my instructions have told me to do, that they must be in hypnosis because that's what it says. Take out those assumptions. We need to see the unconscious mind in action. If we're not seeing it, it means we need to adjust accordingly. So, if you've had the experience with your partner, we can take it one step further. Again, we'll come back to the hypnotic interview later. Let's now move on and give you an experience of what it feels like to do something therapeutic. And this is just the very basics. We've got to stick with the basics right now. We need to look at therapeutically. We're going to look at one version. This is not the version. It's not the only version. It's a version of therapy. This is known as the hypnotic suggestion. Now, already you've already done this. You've done this through your priming sequence. You're suggesting things about the trance. You're suggesting things about looking after Joe through his trance. Then in your induction, you are suggesting themes about hypnotic trance, what it feels like so Joe would start to feel them. You're already using these suggestions. So when it comes to therapy, the great thing about a client being in an unconscious state is they're very suggestible. Means that we can offer ideas to our client to think about and for our clients to feel in shape of what is known as a therapeutic suggestion. Now, there are two therapeutic suggestions we can look at. We have a direct suggestion or an indirect suggestion. Right now, we're going to look at direct, which is just straightforward. You're going to tell your client what to think or what to feel as a matter of speaking. Then we'll look at more indirect stuff a little bit later on. But the direct suggestion becomes the easiest and more tangible place for us to be right now, just to give you an understanding, especially if you're your first time doing something therapeutic. Now, when your client is in trance, you've got to be very careful what we're saying. This does not mean that when your client's in trance, we can tell them to do anything we want them to do and they're automatically going to do it. That's not the case. Just like the conscious mind looks after the unconscious mind is extremely wise and it will know when you're taking advantage of it. Although it becomes that little puppy that we're playing with, it does not mean we can ask the puppy to do something we wouldn't want them to do and put the puppy in harm's way, because it will adjust accordingly. So with our suggestion, all I want you to write down with your bit of paper is what's a short statement you would like to tell either your volunteer that you're working with, might even be a friend or a family member, someone you really care about. what would be something nice you would like to tell them while they're in trance? Let's say, for example, I'm working with Joe, and Joe's a good friend of mine, so I do care for Joe. Now, Joe's got his eyes closed. I've done my priming. I've done my induction. I can see the unconscious moment starting to happen, so I know he's in hypnosis. Then I might say to Joe, I want you to take this time and do something remarkable with it for your life. That's it, Joe. Take the time and really think this through to do something remarkable with this time that will affect your life in the positive. That's it, Joe. Really take this time and find something positive from it that will affect your life in such a great way. So what have I done right there? I'm using repetition like we've done automatically, but I'm suggesting Joe to do something over and over again in a very positive term. I'm not saying to Joe, you need to do this, this, and this because I said so. I'm telling Joe to take this time he's in right now, as an example, take the trance he's in right now and do something with it. Feel a certain something, find something, see something in this trance that will affect your life positively. Now, what do you think is going to happen from this? Well, the unconscious mind will act accordingly if it likes the suggestion you've given it. Now, to know, well, how do I know what my client's unconscious mind wants to hear compared to what it doesn't want to hear? If you keep it positive, it'll more likely absorb the suggestion and do something with it. If you're mean and nasty, it'll automatically block the suggestion and your client will come out of trance. So keep it positive. The unconscious mind, the faculty of the unconscious mind is always working towards positivity, health, well-being, growing as a person, becoming a better person. It's always working on these things. So we're giving it a bit of a nudge. And we're saying to Joe, the trance you're in right now is a perfect opportunity to do something positive. Think of something. Find something that makes you feel good, Joe. Remember something that makes you feel good, Joe. And I'm going to use that suggestion. I'm not going to repeat it. So let's say I give myself 1 minute to do something therapeutically. I'm not just going to say it once and then let it sit there. I'm going to say it once, give maybe 3 to 5 seconds to absorb the suggestion, and then I'm going to repeat it again. And I might throw in some different pauses. Put more emphasis, more intent on the suggestion that I'm giving Joe. I want him to act accordingly to the suggestion. Give him another 3 to 5 second pause so he can absorb it. And then I'm going to repeat it again. Now, in that minute, I might be able to repeat it 10, 15, 20 times. I just want to keep repeating the same theme and the same idea over and over, but not just automatically like I'm getting bored with it. I want to include my EVP along the way, because if I pause in different places, although I'm saying the same words, it almost becomes a different suggestion. Now try that for yourself. It'd be very interesting to see if that becomes a new suggestion for you. I'm going to put a lot of intent, a lot of care, a lot of emphasis in the words I want Joe to feel. Now again, how do I know if my therapy is taking place? Well, I'll probably see those unconscious moments. Let's say, for example, I've said to Joe, take this time and do something remarkable with Joe. Think of something that makes you feel so happy. I'll let Joe think about it and I'll repeat it again. And maybe the second, third, or fourth time, I see Joe starting to tear a little bit, like a cries of joy, and he starts to smile and laugh. What's happened here is the therapy has taken place. The therapeutic suggestion has had a hold on Joe. Now, if you think back to the 4 ways the unconscious mind deals with information, law of association, so it allows repetition to create something. Maybe it came through as a symbol or came through as a memory. It's definitely come through as an unconscious moment. So let's say I've asked Joe to do a certain something or feel or remember something, and Joe automatically remembers a magnificent time he was with his family at a beach or a gathering or maybe Christmas time that he'd forgotten about, and that Joe starts to feel the memory. He starts to feel the experience. Or maybe he falls into the experience again and experiences all for a better time in the second way. Whatever Joe's feeling as a result, or noticing, or imagining even, from the suggestion that I've given him, has allowed something therapeutic to take place and given Joe a pleasant sensation or a pleasant feeling. Now, this will come through, like we said, as an unconscious moment. This lets me know that what I've said has had a result. If Joe, however, is sitting there from my therapy suggestion and there's no unconscious moment, he hasn't smiled, he hasn't laughed, his shift of position hasn't moved, it looks like he's just sitting there in a nice place, It doesn't mean later on the therapy won't take place, but it just lets me know that, you know what, I'm going to say something different and see if I can get a result. Now, this will be a back and forward thing with your suggestions till you find the right suggestion for that client. So what I would like you to do is grab your training partner or grab your trance buddy, if you would, and I want you to try this on. Always keep in the positive. Always keep in the positive. Don't do anything negative. This is not evil hypnosis school. We want to keep them in a safe environment where they can learn and give them something remarkable. Look at this as giving them a hypnotic gift. Tell them something positive. Tell them this could do something for them in their life. Now, this is not to say if you're first time doing it, you're not saying things like you will overcome smoking now. You will overcome your addiction. You'll overcome this, that, or other. Because that has other processes you need to put in place before you can look at how to treat big issues if they were. Right now, you're just practicing with something positive. Ask your client to remember something amazing, to feel a certain something that it fills them up with exciting feelings. Just something very positive, very tangible, and always be on the hunt for the unconscious moments. I cannot stress enough what unconscious moments do for us. Again, keep them simple. If you see them, whatever you're doing right now is working. If you're not seeing them, it means that what you've done or what you're doing right now is not having the effect that it can. You need to adjust accordingly. So that's your first therapeutic suggestion. Once you've given the suggestion to your client, you wake them up like so. Tell them to come out of trance or come back into the room. Then give them that thumbs up. Put a big smile on your face. Then ask them what happened when I gave you that suggestion. What came to mind? Was it a picture? What is a symbol? Did you remember something? Did you feel something? And just get some feedback. This subtle feedback along the way helps you adjust as a hypnotist. It helps you become that hypnotist that you desire. If, however, they say, well, I didn't feel anything, I didn't notice anything, don't take it as a criticism. This is a training course. This course will require you to listen to it over and over and over again. We don't become a hypnotist overnight. It can take many, many, many years to get good at hypnosis, and then many more years to really master it, and then many more years after that to really come to terms with what can be done with hypnosis. Because hypnosis is always changing, because the different type of people you work with, the different contexts you find yourself in, the different ailments, the different problems, the different challenges you have, these all put into place as a hypnotist, and you never stop learning. The greatest hypnotists of all time never stop learning. They can adjust with their mistakes. If you even want to call them mistakes, they're just learning scenarios. It's the same thing with this training course. So, there we have it. That's the exclusive look at unconscious moments. Now, when we get to the demonstrations, you'll be able to hear those unconscious moments in action. Being that this is an auditory course, you're not seeing anything, you're just listening to my voice, and then on the demonstration, listening to the student's voice as well, or the client's voice as well. You have to listen closely for those unconscious moments. And when we break down the sessions, I'll be able to point out exclusively what I was hearing, why I went that way, why I said certain things, to give you a dramatic breakdown of how that all comes together. So, we're at a point now where I've thrown a lot of information at you, and we're a couple of hours through this training course. Now, realistically, we've only looked at priming sequence as a big chunk of what we've done right now. I've introduced you to the EVP, and now I've introduced you to unconscious moments. You've had one go at an induction, and you've had one little simple therapeutic induction or therapeutic suggestion to play with. But already, you should be coming to grips, especially if you're new to this, to see how diverse hypnosis can be. To see that even though this is the very basics right now, even when we get to more advanced stuff, to introduce you to those ideas as well, the basics always exist. So before we end this session, let's look at what we've done so far. You've done your priming, you've done your hypnotic induction, and you've done your therapy. Let's now add the ABSU formula and see if it fits somewhere in there. The priming is the A. We start talking, we should start to get some attention. Now, how do we know we've got someone's attention when we're speaking to them formally? Well, they're probably looking at us. They're probably paying attention to what we're saying and maybe conversing with us a little bit. The B comes from bypassing the conscious mind with our induction. We've told them to feel this in trance, feel relaxed, feel like they're sinking into the chair. Now, the S, the stimulation of the unconscious mind, or stimulation of the unconscious moment, it means that in order, and this is key, in order to get an unconscious moment, you must have indirectly or directly bypassed the conscious mind. And I'll repeat that. In order to get an unconscious moment, you must have taken off the lid, which is the conscious mind, and thrown it to the side. You have to have bypassed the conscious mind in order to get an unconscious moment. If you haven't bypassed the conscious mind, it means your technique hasn't worked. You won't get any unconscious moment. Now, the therapy came from the simple suggestion, like feel this in your life or imagine this and feel really good about it. As long as you're getting some sort of unconscious moment, it means that the therapy has stimulated. You've grabbed a hold, you've seen the unconscious moment, and you've added to it, you've expanded it. You're increasing the unconscious moment by allowing your client to think or feel, just from this scenario with this suggestion, and it's created more unconscious moments, which means you got unconscious moments from the induction. Now you've got more unconscious from the therapy. This just means that everything you're doing right now is having a dramatic effect. And then you've closed off trance like normal, and you've made your client feel very positive about the good job they've done so far. So what I suggest you do, before we move into the next step, which we're going to backtrack a little, we're going to introduce you to the hypnotic interview. Take some time. So there's a lot of information. Wrap your head around the new ideas that I've introduced you to. Wrap your head around the unconscious moments. Now, for a little homework on the side, what I suggest you do, and this is a fun little exercise, from now on, even if you're not formally inducing someone into hypnosis, you're not formally seeing clients, all you're doing is just talking to people in the big world that you have, or you're being social, whatever the case may be. Notice how obvious unconscious moments are, even when you're just talking to someone. Ask someone about the holiday they've just been on, and notice the unconscious moments you get from the very memory. Remembering the unconscious mind deals with a certain information with memory, about the memory they remember about being on holiday and being here and doing this and meeting these people, but how excited they get. Do they start to blink more? Does their breathing change? Do they get excited? Do they slow down? You can actually get unconscious moments by just talking to people that's far away from actually doing anything hypnotically. And this means something important to us, which is the reason we have natural unconscious moments and made up unconscious moments or created unconscious moments, which will be the first platform for our next session. So there you have it. You've done a lot of training so far. You've got a lot of information. You should be very, very proud of where you are right now. But this is not a one-time hit wonder. You need to re-listen to this stuff, write new notes, and most of all, you need to practice this stuff. Make mistakes, get some wins, put it all together. Very rarely you're ever going to go through a whole hypnotic career without making mistakes. Even the best of us will make a truckload of mistakes. It's how you deal with them that's important. And unconscious moments allows you to adjust and be flexible every step along the way. So congratulations up until this point. But when you're ready, let's jump over to the next session where I'm going to introduce you to the difference between natural unconscious moments and created unconscious moments. We'll look at the hypnotic interview as a formal lesson and a big part of what we're doing right now, but also start to play with some more inductions so we're not left with the basics. All right, we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.